Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the Cloud IDR webinar as we are recording this on 24th January. And today's webinar is around because we're only the first month of the 2025. So the aim of the game is to understand what's going to happen next with the next few months and in the year 2025. And during this session, you will be able to learn tips and tricks on saving cost on AC2 instances and or how to save cost in Kubernetes cluster as well as self-managed Kubernetes cluster and some tips and tricks on saving instances on ECS and EKS cluster and how to monitor and alert as you cluster go ideal spend, which is a cost of our provisioning cluster infrastructure and effectively managing or implementing cloud cost solution as part of your FinOps processes and some of the four common FinOps workflow required for the cloud and effective way to save money on your cloud spend. So that is the aim of the game for this webinar. And we look forward to seeing if people have some question today. I will be answering those to my wonderful panelists I have today. So I can straight go to Ahmed Beavers from CNCF Ambassador and a very good friend of mine. Over to you, Ahmed. Can you give us a very quick intro of yourself and where you are busy these days?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ahmed Babors. As Sam mentioned, I'm a CNCF ambassador, but I'm also on my day-to-day job. I'm a principal engineer at the New York Times. I'm busy in Kubernetes. That's where I'm busy. KubeCon London is coming, KCD New York. So that's where all of the community stuff. But other than that, just like, it's New Year. So planning, figuring out what new features coming to Kubernetes, upgrades, all of the fun stuff coming around.
Very much for your intro, and I think like you have actually your talk is actually accepted for KubeCon as well. So I'm really looking forward to that one as well. So let's go to another panelist or other host, another guest, and Khurshid Hassan, CEO of the Cloud IDR. And Khurshid, over to you. Give us your quick intro and little bit about of your company and your day-to-day job these days.
Thank you for hosting it. And Ahmed, great to meet you. This is the first time we are in person connecting or virtually connecting, so it's a pleasure here. My name is Khurshid Hassan. I'm a founder of Cloud IDR. We started this company last year. And before that, I was with EC2 and AWS infrastructure. So in a way, you can think about in this panel, I am the ex-cloud builder. So how cloud is built and what the intricacies are there, I can help you there. And then obviously, I think Ahmed here is from a other side of this pendulum, from a consumer point of view, how this thing can be looked at. So I think this should be a fun webinar.
A quick intro. So I'm actually moving away. So I will be back door. And Khurshid, can you share your screen? We can kickstart the proceeding. So I will be in the back door monitoring some attendees' questions, and I will actually interrupt you as you go as well. But over to you, Khurshid. So give us a quick intro, and then Babar Ahmed will be also for you as well. So over to you now, Khurshid.
All right, super. This slide can be seen, right? The slide, the share thing is such super.
Yes, absolutely. I can
So
able to see this as well, and I hope audience can able to see this as well.
yeah, so this is a Gartner forecast. We know the cloud is the thing. It has been there for the last 15, 16 years. And the most interesting part is that there is no hiccups in its growth. So no matter how you look at it from a Gartner analyst point of view, or you look at from the quarterly financial announcements that are done by the Azure, Google Cloud, or Amazon AWS, you will see that the pace still is anywhere from 15 to roughly 30% for each of the cloud providers. That's a pretty fast growth rate, no matter how you slice and dice it. And cloud is the operation, is the way that companies are being built and the greatest companies are being built today in the world. So we know all of that is just to kind of reassure us that, yes, what we are talking about really makes sense. It's not something which is going away. And we need to keep on thinking how we can optimize our usage and ROI from it. This other slide is sort of a high level view of how we see the world. And I mean, in my journey when I was at AWS, I had the fortunate opportunity to talk to perhaps hundreds of customers and look at the workloads and whatnot. So what is very clear, first bullet point is that yes, cloud computing provides unmatched scalability, right? I mean, when you talk about scalability, it's not only the on-demand part where you can just scale the machines as you want to, but also in what places, in what regions of the world, what different types of combinations that are available. There's a very rich combination of compute and GPUs that are available with the cloud providers. The other thing which I've noticed, and I think Ahmed can also kind of add here, is serverless computing is also taking off. It has been there for a number of years, but now I think it's more in the mainstream in the way that people are thinking, hey, from a cost optimization point of view, these functions I should be running, or these part of my code should be running on serverless, and because I don't need to spin machines 24/7. Ahmed, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. Serverless has been growing, and like I don't know, like it has a concrete value more than cost, because like the speeds, other things that you can deploy to, but definitely cost is one of the big motivating elements for applications that not necessarily have to be running all the time. I'm sure you are like looking around the cloud leaders industry, and you see like it wasn't just about compute. It now started to be like, hey, you can get your database in serverless, you can get everything in serverless. And I think like it helps more with more of the cloud trends. But to be honest, some use cases might be hard for serverless to be more optimized, because it's optimized already for like, hey, if you're running something that it's like not running all the time, not consistent, you want to make sure that you account for all of that traffic, downtime, basically fine for serverless. But when you start to run like heavily on serverless that's running all the time, some cases it might be expensive. So you always have to figure out what is the right way of like running your compute or infrastructure or like database or Kafka clusters. But you're right about it.
Yeah, right. So to totally agree with you, with Ahmed, I think what I've also seen is that these are like you have to identify sets of or subsets of workloads or functions which are suitable for serverless computing. The third trend is that there is a huge debate in the industry, right? Is a cloud only world? Is it like a on-premise world? As everybody knows, it's not there. It's going to be it's shrinking. But is it a hybrid world? Is a combination? I think this is a hybrid world because there are a lot of applications out there which needs locality or close to where the consumer or the users of these applications are. And one aspect of that proof, what you can see is the number of local zones. Local zone is a construct where a smaller data center, instead of a huge region, where you have a huge region-based control planes consuming thousands of RAM just to kind of control the region, you have like smaller data centers put in, let's say, in Los Angeles or Phoenix or Dallas, kind of to help media entertainment, low latency applications, right? So we are seeing that trend, and we are seeing a larger and larger numbers of local zones or local data centers outside the main regions being coming up. So that is a very, very prominent trend here as well. The fourth thing, which I think is where there's still a lot of education needed in the industry, is that there is a sort of inherent belief that I can scale as much as I want to at any time I want to. That is not a true assumption, because no matter what the extra buffers the cloud providers provide, there are certain limits to how much everybody can scale at the same time in a place in a region, right? So I think there is a early recognition, some by some more than others, that you have to think about the DR elements or the cyber recovery elements, and how do you want to kind of orchestrate your databases and storage and compute resources so you can recover quickly. And that is an evolving thing, and where I think Cloudidr can also help customers. The final point I want to kind of point out is that in my conversations with CIOs and everybody and CFOs, there is there's always this thing, okay, we are going to move to the cloud, but there's always the sticker shock to say that, hey, this is so expensive, right? And how am I justifying my ROI, my business growth versus the cost on the cloud? So I think that is where this webinar and a lot of other people are putting webinars as well as building tools and software to kind of shape that cost angle. Emma, do you want to add anything to it?
I think you covered it all. I think like cost and cloud trends in general, it's gonna still like be consistent with the rise of like how are we moving more and more towards the cloud. But it's also interesting that like I have seen different trends as well that I want to mention that have people started to move off the cloud. And just as like it's also a trend, it's a cost trend, despite if it's a cloud trend or not. It's coming from like all of the new AI technologies, how people are investing in technology in general. So it's very, very touchy subject for me in general, like how you really do cost optimization in general in any software engineering organization that I have worked with or like I consulted for. And it's always gonna be a thing that it's one of your KPIs because you just like have to understand the return of investment on like where this is coming and like we have to reduce the cost. But I think cloud providers also like trying to optimize for things like that, trying to bring more market share in the industry around like how flexible they can run many things. In the back of the day, I remember like you just have to run your compute in an EC2 instances, for example, in AWS. Now you can run it in many flavors, different pricing, different all of the kind of elements. So it's always gonna be a trend, not just in 2025, but I think like for wherever
Forever.
years coming, forever.
Thank you, Em. Right. So I think this is sort of another high-level view of what are the sort of challenges behind the cloud adoption. Now, companies who were born in cloud, they understand this very well. But at a high level, I think we talked about cloud cost optimization. I touched briefly that, hey, you have to think about outages, especially on mission critical workloads, right? Where you really need to be up all the time. And how would you compensate for it? Either it's a multi-AZ architecture or the multi-region architecture, or it's active passive. You have to kind of think through that a lot. And then, especially with a lot of push with the regulation, the third bullet point here is, hey, which regions do you want to select? Where do you want to run your store your customer data or your own corporate data? And then I think the fourth element here is that uh, if you're spending enormous amount of your operational build on one cloud, can you take it and kind of run it on the other cloud, or how do you kind of manage that scenario in a multi-cloud environment? So I'll let Ahmed kind of talk a little bit more about number 4 and 5 points here.
Yeah, let me be honest and tell you one thing about like vendor lock-in and multi-cloud. Doesn't work. It just like in many scenarios, it's just harder and harder to find uh, the same concepts in general. Like some examples might work, which is Kubernetes is one of the great examples that works, for example, on how you have like the same abstract. But when you look deeper down, it's just like there are always some sort of like a tool or a service that it's provided by one cloud or another that it doesn't really match or it doesn't really map into the same way. So like I'm always finding multi-cloud vendor agnostic harder and harder to achieve in most case scenarios and requires like more further abstractions. Uh, what else we were talking about? Talking about cost optimization.
Yeah, so talent, how
It's
are you finding the talent to operate the cloud? Especially now you mentioned that one has to think about multi-cloud environments in any way.
it's here's the thing. Like talent gap is always gonna keep rising with the rising of how technology is going. It's just always like, you have to keep like people up to date and like what are you doing? And then like we also with that the one thing that I want to say when you ask someone like 10 years ago, hey, do you know AWS? AWS by that time was like a few services. Now you can't ask if you know AWS or you know GCP. You just have to ask like which detailed service that you have worked on. So it's really comes into like, are you looking for like a really niche uh talent in a specific areas that might be harder to find in some use cases. Also, like with the incremental and I don't want to say incremental, with a significant development on like how cloud technology companies, Google, Amazon, IBM, all of the big players, Microsoft, everyone, it's just like harder and harder to like just make that gap shorter. So the ways that like I feel the community is trying to make part of it is just like training, teaching people what to do, like what's the right abstraction, trying as much as we can to bring things like agnostic from an open source perspective to make it easier. Like let's imagine how hard it would be if we don't have Kubernetes in the cloud. Like each cloud provider would come with their own container orchestration system, which already exists, by the way, today, versus ECS versus something else. And then like this would make it harder and harder. But now like open source helps with filling these gaps because it provides standards in one way or another. The other elements like availability, availability is a bigger thing where like outage, it just like is really like one of the things that like you don't see much if you develop your application in a good shape and good way, like between like multiple AZs, multiple regions. If you have the time to spend on like making your disaster recovery and your high availability implemented, I wouldn't say you would have problems, but like really how to scale the application, how to get the capacity you need. The one thing that you mentioned here is GPU. Don't work too much with GPU, but I know it's a very, very you might actually give me insight on that. I know it's a very trendy topic, and sometimes you cannot get the GPUs that you ask for. I heard people saying like, "Hey, I just want to do a machine learning job, and I can't get GPU around for my workers." So, but that's where I'm at. Like, and it's always gonna change. Always gonna see like new things coming out was all of that. Like security back in the day was something, now it's getting more complex. Also was evolving technology. Security is becoming more complex and complex because like everything right now runs in the cloud. We have all of that Gen AI tooling and all of that quantum computing. Everything is coming fast. So what we have done for security back in the day is just different from what we want to do right now. And with like, global and multi-country, multinational organization, it's always harder and harder to keep the standards. So challenges are gonna be there. Like there are always ways optimizing how you do for things like that, but it exists. At some point, it exists.
Yeah, super. Thank you for the insight here, Ahmed. So, as we're talking about in the last slide, the first thing is cloud cost optimization. So, from a cloud idea point of view, we have defined five key tenets on cloud. And the first one is that in order to do any optimization anywhere, you really need to understand the full life cycle of that product or that service or that operation. And I'm going to show that in the next slide, how we think about the cloud management life cycle. The other thing is that this is very honest. You don't want to get treated for a disease. You want to prevent the disease, right? Cost prevention is better, and it can only happen through best governance practices, right? Rather than coming later on and saying, hey, I incurred this XYZ cost, right? How can you build the infrastructure? How do you build your checks and balances, which prevents the anomalies, outliers to happen? The third element in a thing is that one team in its own cannot manage the cloud. I mean, you need to have cross-organizational agreement, alignment between different teams, or dev team, QA team, business analytics team, whoever is on the cloud, right? They need to understand, and they need to understand how we are going to do this governance, how we're going to operate together as a whole organization. So again, a structured system needs to be built in order to make that happen. The fourth element is that every organization is unique. You cannot have one single governance plan, say, look, I am going to do this thing, in this company X, and then it will apply to Y. No, you have to modify, because the organizational structure, the team division, everything is unique. That even the compute types or GPU types or orchestration layer may be unique, right? And finally, the most important point is it is a continuous process. Just like health, maintaining your health is a continuous process. It's not a one-time shot. You did an audit, you say, fine, I'm going to go away. You have to continuously monitor how things are evolving. Is your structures right? Your governance structures right? Your processes are correct? And then looking at it on a constant basis, the reporting to say, look, no, we still have an outlier here. We still something goes beyond our baseline, which we are expecting, right? So we need to, we typically when we go and work with companies, we say, look, you have to take this as your blueprint and think through it and build your processes and structures and everything around it.
Actually, I agree with you in that, like, very the one thing that I have seen gone wrong in many people's stories is actually trying to move to the cloud without putting the framework first. It's just like it's the idea of like, hey, I have an application trying to run through the cloud. Let's go for it. Let's just open it. And then like you get hit with a bill if you don't have the right framework in place. And it's definitely the one of the things that like really resonate with me is that continuous monitoring. It's not like a one-time thing that like, hey, oh, okay, we moved to the cloud, everything is good, just let's move on. It's like a process you have to go on, and like you have to build like a very good governance model in your organization to ensure that you have the insight handy and not to get like, hey, last month we have like $2 million extra for wherever, or like 10 million, like we didn't expect that, or like we have an instance that like we weren't supposed to run. So all of these things could be super helpful for like a large organization, specifically for like a large distributed migration projects that you go through. Teams are not like very well connected, so from day one, actually from day zero, you should have like a good governance model and life cycle implemented so you would avoid this situation. But you nailed it.
Yeah. And I think in order to enable the five, what is really important, and this is what we are seeing also, is the FinOps expert, right? A FinOps expert or a team who are actually have the authority to push changes. Because it's not only sufficient to say, look, 2 million extra costs has happened, but how do we actually make sure it doesn't happen next time, on what changes we need to implement? So as somebody who's dedicated to kind of drive that on a continuous basis, because continuous improvement in the process structures and accountability is really important here. So FinOps, as many people know, is really becoming important as a FinOps foundation as well. And at Cloudidr, we do provide FinOps experts to kind of do all of these five things that we mentioned. So, and I think this is sort of a really important to understand cloud cost management life cycle. So we touched one aspect in the last slide. We talked about continuous monitoring, right? All right. So if you look here at the bottom right, you have continuous monitoring. You're looking at multiple things, month-over-month KPI trends. You're looking at the outages or performance matrix. You're looking at the spending, right? You're looking at all the stuff. But you need to take that and say, look, I need to now have learned what a miss is, and I need to kind of fix those, right? So right sizing, idle termination, these everybody knows. And maybe even re-architecting your application. So this is sort of a flows from monitoring to fine tuning. But what most of the companies fail, which we're talking about earlier in the last slide, is the top part, is the governance part. Because in the governance part, if you can do planning, forecasting, budgeting, and say, look, for the next 1 year, I see my business growing this way, and I will define certain KPIs that my cloud spend should match my revenue growth or should match my profitability growth, then you can have some sense and some sort of accountability in the organization, and which you can sort of monitor on a regular basis, on a weekly operations review or a monthly operations review. Not only looking at everything else, but also looking at your cloud spend, which really becomes part of your bottom line, right? Improving your bottom line in the business. Now, if you do planning, the next thing is that how do you go and sort of purchase? What type of capacity, or what type of discounts, or what type of strategic price negotiations should you do? Because if you can plan in a somewhat better way, then you can actually go and do some strategic pricing negotiation, get things at a cheaper rate, even what was advertised, what is available, right? Which is we call private pricing here. So to cloud idea, to me, having this cycle starting from planning, purchasing all the way down is a really, really, really important way to operationalize and cost optimize your cloud spend. Any thoughts, Amit, on this?
Like I think this is going in the right direction. Like for me, it's not really the cycles that I'm usually involved in from like different things, but I go for like more understanding how we plan cost allocations, all of the kind of stuff. Like I'm more in the implementation side when it comes to more cost optimization is one of the areas that I'm still like trying, to evolve into understanding. So like leaning to learn more from you, like what is the process. But the one thing that it makes sense to me, it's the one thing that I like about this, it's a continuous cycle. It's not like a single cycle. It's always like a planning versus monitor fine tune. Like you have to go through the entire thing about like what exactly you're looking for. Like you have to understand like what kind of resources that you're looking for and like how to reduce the number on it. And it's not like one person job. It's just like a whole team organizations. There are softwares, there are different things in the industries that do these things better and all actually automate them as well. Because one of the hardest thing to do in any organization is just like do these things manually. So like the more automations that you can get from different tools, from different cloud providers, it definitely help.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So if you map back and you think about from a uh, cost management point of view, or to I'm going more kind of say, look, this bottom part of the cycle, what has been happening, right, in the industry? So if you kind of go back a few years ago, a number of tools came out, third-party tools, and I think cloud providers had lagged behind in providing the quality tools for monitoring. Now they're catching up, but it hadn't been the case previously. So the tools which came out would say, hey, where you have idle instances or where you have not utilizing those instances properly, and kind of right size those, right, through the monitoring, and then the DevOps or somebody in the team will go and kind of shut them down or change the type of machines and whatnot, right? So that was the step one in this whole journey of the last few years. What you have seen is then people said, you know what, I know, okay, I can differentiate my workloads, steady state workloads, which you're constantly using, and versus spikes that happen over time, daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal events. So why not purchase discounts? And discounts are usually 1 year, 3 year commitments in the cloud. And they started identifying baseline workloads and say, look, oh, okay, I can provide reserve instances or savings plan for this type, this much. And I'm going to cut down my cost by 30, 40, 50%, whatever, right? So that was step two in the journey. Now, what we have seen is the step three is that because Kubernetes has basically become the operating system of the cloud, is that, okay, is Kubernetes, can we do something within that operating system to make it more cost optimized, right? And what you're seeing now is a bunch of companies who are coming and say, okay, now one and two has been done. Let's go and do a third thing, which is, can we bin pack machines, right? So instead of having too many machines, can we put up pods in packer pods in the same node, or can we have the fewest number of nodes? I'll pass to you because this is right in your domain, Ahmed.
Yeah, so this evolved, like really like the whole idea of like how to get from like one step to another. So I actually like I went through the whole cycle, but the cycles that I want to talk about is like back like a few years ago, like it wasn't like that too far that you to orchestrate a Kubernetes cluster, you have to do kube admin and do all of the thing yourself. Like you get bare bone EC2, you have to go through this whole life cycle, you have to figure out like what is the right size, like how to do it, all of the kind of stuff. So I'm talking about like step 3 and 4. And then like you found things coming in the market that helps with all of that, then backing methodology that like okay, now let's do like consolidation, let's do shifting. Carpenter is one of the good tools that does this. But this is also like all of these things are like evolving into a way that I think like I don't know if we are moving backward some sort of situation to be honest, but like feel like we've been in serverless way ago. Now we bring in Kubernetes to make it serverless, which is fun, but it's just kind of like we are there. Like, why are we not going there? And then one of the features that I actually love, and like I'm gonna make a couple episodes on AKS auto mode to talk about like how we are going forward to like you don't even have to worry about your control plane. So we evolved from like, hey, I run my control plane, I run my EC2, and I gonna figure my cost implications to Carpenter and things where like, okay, now like I do all of the backend consolidation on the node level, but like still I have to manage few of these pieces together, make sure that like my control plane and my other things all in. And then like you come to something like EKS Auto Mode and you come to Autopilot, like many cloud provider provides something similar where like you just launch it and then like it works, you don't have to worry about anything. But like here's the thing, nothing of this comes without cost. Like when I think about it from one perspective, like no, like the example that comes handy to mind, there's a 10% increase when you use EKS auto mode versus you use the other thing. It's not this thing that like, hey, oh yeah, it's great, let's use it. It like might have few use cases. There are some things still missing. So everything comes out. It's just like it's not fully like you have to figure out. So I want when I go back to what are you saying about planning versus all of the stuff, it still have to go through planning. You can't just like because it went from one way to another, it means that's easier for you. I have seen like I may know applications on top of mind when it comes like EKS or the mode might be harder to use if you are like in a very significant cluster. That might be not the right idea. I don't know. I have to run the numbers. So back to what are you saying? Planning is important. So like you have to understand like what are you getting yourself into with all of that technology coming ahead. But I'm interested to hear from you on really what's next. What do you think it's next?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think this is a kind of slide where we are right in the middle of our webinar to kind of jump from here. This is the world today, right? We understand what needs to happen. And one thing I really want to kind of latch on to what Emma said is that all of these services are actually cost you 10%. You keep on adding 5%, 10% here. So whatever your infrastructure cost was just getting piled up. So you're not getting anything for free. So the question is, are you making money? Are you net positive or not? That's the equation that needs to be looked into as well, right? Okay, so now let's kind of move to the heart of the problem. We've kind of have a few slides here which we say, look, what shall we be doing? So there's a lot of words in these slides, but at the but just I can focus on the title here. As the companies are growing, their type of services they are using, the type of machines they are using, the type of regions that they are is going bigger and bigger. What's called cloud sprawl, right? And this is where cost is. How do you manage all this sprawl? How do you understand where to operate, not to operate, so on and so forth, right? And do you have the best visibility, right? Because if you don't have visibility, you don't know what action to take, right? Monitoring, coming back to the life cycle of monitoring. Do you have the right tooling in place? And then where I think very little work has been done is that, okay, once you have the visibility, do you have the predictability? Can you predict how you're going to grow as an organization 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or 2 years from now? Because if you do not have it, then you cannot actually understand how you should manage your cloud spend, right? Because there will be outliers all over the place, right? So I think what we are saying here is that where I think that the industry can put some effort and energy is looking at your trend, looking at what is coming. Can you build some predictive models, forecasting models within your cloud center of excellence or in the FinOps department to say, look, I at least have a first order idea of how my growth is going to happen. And can we pull that into our planning and baseline planning and KPIs for the business? So that is, I think, something which is lacking right now heavily, and there's a big opportunity there. The second thing is, which we talked in some of the earlier slides, is that and I think Amit kind of latched onto it as well, is that, hey, not every cloud is kind of evolving or providing services at the same level, right? There's a discrepancy. So if you're forced to do multi-cloud for whatever reason, how are you managing that? Are you kind of switching consoles every time? You have a central set of scripts which is looking at it. You have a central cost management dashboard, or how are you doing that, right? Can we have, and I think has been some work already in this one, can we have a single pane of glass where I can look at all of my different cloud costs, and kind of go at a deeper level in a sort of a microscopic way to say, look, okay, I need to make improvement here, or I need to bring it back, or we need to bring it back to our planning team and say, look, talk to the stakeholders and so on and so forth. Now, the third thing is interesting, and there are two key pieces here. One is, even when customers are able to understand that they have a baseline workload and they should actually reduce the cost of it by buying a 3-year commitment, for example, reserve instances commitment. Many times I've seen that they're not getting utilized fully, right? Because your business may have gone down. You thought it's going to stay, but it may have gone down, right? Or some other combination. So how are you ensuring that your reserve instances are actually utilized at the maximum level, 98, 99% level? So the money that you spend is actually of value, right? So that is the important thing. I think there's some work needed in the industry for that. One aspect that people do is they just buy incremental RIs, right, or savings plan. But again, even if you buy over time, you buy a small step staircase, you end up having a lot 1 year down the road, 6 months down the road. Is it all getting utilized? Maybe yes, maybe not. Now, the second point is that, and this is really, really important, I think many people do not really grasp this point, is the high cost of on-demand. Now, they understand high cost of on-demand. Where they don't understand is the breakdown of their workloads, which is baseline, consistent, and the fluctuation that happens on top of it. So the reserve instances, you never buy reserve instances for fluctuating workloads, which are on top of your baseline, right? Think about your baseline, and then you have another set of fluctuations, sine wave cycles. Think about sine waves. So how do you compensate for that? How do you reduce that raw infrastructure cost down? How do you get the cheapest instances, machines, smallest machine possible to do the work, right? And I think there is really not an answer there, right? And one of the things that Cloudidr has done, and we kind of put that out sort of in a self-serving manner, is we have built something called Flex Compute, which allows you to take care of this fluctuating non-steady state workloads and get the cheap instances at a cheaper price without actually committing to any 1 year, 3 year plans. So, and this is, I think, will become important as we move forward, because people will want to get lower cost on demand like instances. And why, you may ask the question, is cloud not providing cheaper instances? Because they have to spend 30, 40, $50 billion building the next set of infrastructure. If they start breaking down the cost for the most premium models of the car and having to fund their infrastructure needs, right? So there is sort of a dissonance going on. You want to reduce the cost, but cloud providers still need to make a lot of money to invest for subsequent years. So AI is an interesting paradigm. And in my last job, I've seen upfront very close the GPU availability issues. And one of the things that is happening, you may have heard about, the rise of NVIDIA in the last couple of years, is that there is a arms race to build this GPU-based clusters, or even GPU-based whole data centers. The whole data center is built with GPUs, right? Just imagine about that. You have thousands and thousands of GPUs there, so you can run the largest of models without fragmenting your model into 2 different data centers. Because if you have 2 different buildings, there's a latency, there's traffic, IO bandwidth strains, all of that happens. So these large data centers are being built with GPUs, but here's the problem. The problem is, in spite of that the demand is just insatiable demand for the GPUs, right? So the big guys, what the big guys do is, the big guys go and say, you know what? I have the money in my bank. I've been invested $10, $20 billion. I'm going to hog it and lock it for myself, even if I have dead times. Right? The small guys come and say, you know what? I cannot get the machine. Right? So, so this is a very interesting trend. Maybe in 2 years, it will get solved up when everything is built out and we have overbuilt everything. But right now, there is a problem, right? Now, the other problem is that people do not buy reserved instances or savings plan for GPUs because GPUs workloads are not consistent. You are running training and then you have to look at the result, then you come back again. Inferencing is not consistent. You may have morning peaks and it may go down, right? So majority of the people on GPUs are actually running on paying on-demand pricing. Super expensive. So again, this is where our flex compute also comes into play, and we will touch that a little bit better, that you can reduce your on-demand pricing. You want to take this thing? I'm going to talk a little bit about this talent and expertise gaps.
I can. Like as I mentioned earlier, like it's actually one of the things that like we don't really consider in general when you do project. It how expensive could get to get the right talent in place. So the challenge of like having like the required specialized skills and have everyone in place, like between as you said, like from FinOps, from implementation, from all of these, it's a big challenge. And like you say, hey, I want to go to the cloud, then like you have the right team, and then like you end up in a problem. So like if we keep going into that, that means like we like lack of experience in this whole thing could allow prevent people from like doing the right things the right way because the goals when you don't have the right tools as I always try to say use the right tool for the right job. You just like do the job right, but you don't use the right tool, you get like more either expensive, you waste material, or you do whatever. So that's like finding the right partners to work with is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Finding the right teams, the right folks with the mindset, because it's also a mindset. It's not just about the finding the team. It's about like training the teams how to think cost, how to make it, like I'm an engineer. So by definitions, like cost is one of the things like back in the day weren't like the thing like, hey, we have a machine, we're gonna run it. It's a server. It's just like sometimes you don't worry. I only worry about memory and CPU on my machine because it was hard. Now it was like with the cloud, sure, we'll scale it up and things will work. But then with things evolving, people have to think about like how much memory and consuming all of the kind of stuff. So it's a scenario where you have not just to find the right people, but like also to teach your organization what means in cost management, how to be considerate of your architecture. Like you mentioned earlier, of something about like comparison between EKS, ECS serverless. That might be like your scenario. If you just like bias towards one or another with the wrong planning, you could find yourself in a bad position where you spend more when you don't have necessary to go for. So I think like really actually I agree on that slide was getting up everyone into the right practice, the right people, the right tools may be able to address the gap where like how to reduce all of that wasteful spend on cloud in the upcoming years.
Yeah, super. Uh, so, yep, we see sign here.
Okay, thank you very much. I have few questions I have asked. I think I don't know why it's not showing in the QA tab, but someone asked the good question is around some companies is actually moving to the cloud because they are managing Kubernetes in on-premise environment. And we know Kubernetes is quite a very complex if you're managing it by yourself. Now they move into the cloud and they are facing challenges. So, Ahmed, can you tell us if some companies who are expertise in the on-premise environment, what should they do by going the route of using the route of managed Kubernetes in the cloud?
So this is a very broad question, and I don't have the entire context to answer it in. But like, I'm very interested in hearing more. Like, if that person can reach out and like explain like why moving from on-prem to the cloud is actually not the good experience that they're having. Because what one thing for another is like, if you are lift and shift Kubernetes for how you do it, and then go to the cloud and you're trying to do the same thing, it's not gonna work. It's just like you are just like basically, I don't want to say, I could say like you are just like instead of having your own data center, you're just like try to have it in someone else's place. It's just like you're moving one beast from one another. Like the whole idea that it's about improvement. So like if you manage it on premise, that means you manage a control plane. It's not an easy job to manage when we talk Kubernetes, like your ABI server, your etcd, all of the kind of stuff to move to the cloud. But with that said, there are some constraints in some use cases where like how you customize your own control plane, that might be like one of the pieces. Also, like going to one provider or another, there's always like gonna be like the differences in like how you do things. So if you're running something on premise, you probably like your ecosystem of like authentication is completely different from IAM when you go to AWS, from like workload identity when you go to GCP, from anything else. Like it's just like it's different scenarios. So it's like the ways that I'm thinking about is just like it's not just a lift and shift. I think like this is one of the pieces that like it fits under every platform, and this is one of the things that I was talking to Richard about earlier. Is like it's not completely agnostic. Like here they're running Kubernetes and they are going for the cloud, which run Kubernetes as well. Deployments and daemon sets and everything is the same, but there are many different things. The first thing is like you talk. Let's talk about AWS, for example. You do IAM, you need to understand what's URSA, what's pod identity agent. You need to understand like all of the semantics on how you connect with that. But there are solutions. So like it really depends on like what is the problem. So one thing that I have seen recently, and actually this was announced recently, the hyper nodes. Which something allows you to run control plane in the cloud, run your worker nodes in your infrastructure, which is could be like a starter approach, not to do too many things. You still like use your data center. But if that person question was more of like, hey, we are decommissioning our data center, that might not work for them. It's a different story. But it's very interesting, and I have seen different pain points. Like because sometimes you build something. I gonna compare this to one thing. I'll tell you like really quickly. When you build your house, you build it with your own specs. When you go to buy a built house, you can't have your own specs completely 100%. You have to have compromises. So it's where you put the compromises to. That's gonna be the point. You can't just have like whatever you would have before. Like my logs is that way, my scaling's that way, my networking's that way. You have to give something out because like you are getting the control plane management. But I wanna hear what Horshid has to say about something like that. Definitely you have seen migration projects similar.
Oh,
Yeah, so go ahead.
there's one more question, Khurshid. I think I had to cross over to you. I don't know why it's showing my name, but it's somebody else who actually asked this question. Is it possible to have multiple projects in Kubernetes? Yes, it's Asad. So Asad is asking, is it possible to have multiple projects in Kubernetes and have their costs calculated and send the bill to project owner at the end of the month?
Okay, I think there's something I need to look into it. I cannot sort of say upfront, but I think this is a feature request. Okay, so for us, if you're building it, I say, hey, pull it down into Jira. There's a feature request. We should build something like that. I do not know what tools they are using, what they're using, right? So I cannot answer that. But internally, we are also looking to kind of build some unique tools here. So I will use us as thing as question as my feature request.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Same,
Mhm.
Ahmed, to you. Any insights on this one? Have you used something like that?
uh, like projects to build to someone else, charge back. I don't know what that project mean, to be honest. First place, does that mean a cluster? Does that mean a deployment? There are many tools that can do that from an open source perspective. I have seen KubeCost, for example, that does like similar things where you can map it. But at the end of the day, it really depends on the context of like what are you really trying to do, what a project means. Some people might mean uh system or a deployment or a service. I have seen people mean a tenant, some people mean a cluster. So there's always a tool somewhere. It's just like you find, as Hershey said, you find the right tool that like not just do this, but do the rest of that directives that you want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
one quick thing that just comes to my mind quickly as Ahmed was saying is that I think even if let's say AWS or some other cloud provider doesn't provide anything, you can do tags, right? Just use tags to kind of define a project or a user or whatever you want to do, right? And then kind of then filter it in your cost reports.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering this. And Asad, if you have more insight, feel free to ping Khurshid or Ahmed off the line as well on the LinkedIn or some other places. But Khurshid, I think we are now in the 2025. If some of your customer listening to your conversation, can you tell us a little bit about the next few minutes? What is that roadmap coming up?
Yeah, so this is a sort of slide that I'm sharing, which shows us what we have and where a flex compute fits in, right? We talked a lot about cloud cost optimization, the governance cycle, and I think we very briefly touched about one of the root causes of cost. The root cost of cost is the compute is expensive. That's the root cost, right? If something costs $10, if you can bring the cost down to $5, you're saving money without even thinking about anything else, right? Right off the bat. You're buying a cheap car. Like luxury car, you buy at a half price or 30% off, right? This is where we are coming in with Flex Compute. We are saying, look, you can do all the stuff, you should do all the stuff that we talked about, bit packing and everything. But beyond that, what is next? What is next is that can you pull down the cost of the compute that you're using, right? And with Flex Compute, we are building a series of product families. Let's call it products. We have already launched DR. We have customers on DR Cyber Recovery Compute. Basically, this is instead of having active for region failures or cyber attack account freezes, you can basically use us and think about it as active, not even active passive. And when you need the capacity, we'll give you the compute capacity within minutes at 75% lower cost rather than having booking all of that in a different region, paying 24/7 for something which is very random in nature, recovery, right? DR or cyber recovery. We also have this new feature called schedule compute, which is a on-demand type of experience. Customers can come and actually reserve the exact same type of compute that the cloud is providing. It's actually the same compute, frankly speaking. And we buy in bulk so we can reduce the cost and give the savings back to the customer, right? So in their EKS or in their Carpenter, wherever, and this is where we are heading is we want tighter integration. So when you're launching instances, you just purchase from us and you launch into your own cloud account or AWS account, right? And immediately get the savings. So you're not adding anything additional to us. You're not paying for platform tools. You're not paying for anything. You're just getting the instances at a cheap price, which is really profound if you think about it, right? You're just getting a discount, and you're not paying for any additional service. We don't charge for any service. It's not a platform that we're charging for. We're just giving you cheaper things. On the same token, we are looking forward for the rest of the year and say, look, we are going to add GPUs in a portfolio. So for training or inferencing perspective, the company's customers can come and just book chunks of blocks, hours, and these will be cheaper than the on-demand pricing. The same thing with HPC, high performance computing.
Thank you very much, Gurdeep, for sharing your insight with us as well. And this webinar will be available after. You can watch it on the YouTube channel as well in a few days as well. And I will look forward to more question in the chat as well. Ahmed, can you tell us because where people can find you? And I know that you are giving a talk at the KubeCon London, April 1 to the April 5th. So tell us a little bit about of your talk and how people can find you.
Sure. So first of all, you can find me everywhere and anywhere. You just like reach out on LinkedIn, my email. Like I'm in a lot of places. Also like traveling in the next few months, KubeCon, but also like the one in Atlanta and Vegas for reInvent, many things. So reach out to LinkedIn. Happy to connect, and if I'm around, I will meet. So that talk specifically is very interesting because it's about our journey for service mesh. Internally, I has been doing work about Kubernetes and in general for like a platform engineering. But this one is like there's a questions about do you need a service mesh? You don't need a service mesh. And there's a new concept coming with Istio about the ambient. So the service mesh is usually have people think about like, hey, I always need a sidecar, but ambient coming into a situation where like you don't really need a sidecar. So that's gonna be interesting. And I'm very excited because this is my first talk with Lin Sun. Lin Sun, she's an Istio maintainer, and she's also I don't want to pronounce her title wrong, but she's a head of open source at solo.io, which they also just recently donated the Kubernetes gateway project. And I don't know what is the status of it, if it's accepted, sandbox, or what state, but like you can find this in the CNCF project. So I'm excited about this one. Find me. And if you are in KubeCon London, please let's talk. I don't know if either of you is going to be there, but I would love to meet you in person.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I would love also as well. I'm as a wonderful CNCF ambassador. I always excited and been really impressed by all the knowledge he had possesses and sharing his work within the community as well. So he's a very good person to hang out about cloud native stories, success and failure as well sometime. Khurshid, if some of your customer listening to this conversation or some companies who are shaping up their cost strategies in 2025, what is the best way to reach out to your team regarding some of the solutions you are providing to them?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can reach out to us at my email, khassan@cloudidea.com. I'm on LinkedIn. We have a website, www.cloudidea.com. Happy to help out, even if somebody wants to just kind of talk a little bit more about cost management life cycle and how they can implement that in their organizations. We are happy to do that. If somebody's looking to say, look, how Flex Compute can help their raw cost down, happy to help that out and at least give some advice on whatever they can do with their existing setups.
Much. It's been a wonderful session. Unfortunately, we're top of the hour. I really think I like the conversation. I think it's a very cornerstone of the infrastructure conversation we are having these days, considering AI is actually using all the resources all of the time, and sometime with complex Kubernetes infrastructure and with developer productivity, we lost where are the resources are actually being using. And when we hit up with a bill like $2 million, we eventually pay attention to it, and that's not a good solution by design. So you need a team dedicated for the cost management who know when things could go wrong, where things could go wrong, and what are the optimal solution that they can provide to you on your early journey into the cloud as well. While the cloud promises scalability and innovation, its cost challenges required a proactive approach. By addressing issues like skill and talent gap, cloud sprawl, multi-cloud complexity, AI-driven cost, and sustainability, organization can position themselves for success in 2025 and beyond. Thank you very much for joining this conversation. I hope to join you again in another webinar. Thank you, Ahmed. I think it's our second collaboration of the 2025 and look forward to the more collaboration ahead. Thank you, Khurshid, for sharing your insight of what other company is doing. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and don't forget to share your question in the YouTube description, and we look forward to answering those as well.